As we are finishing up the book of Ephesians, in verse 10, Paul kind of changes gears here. And the theme, I guess you could say, or the theme that the author puts in the last few verses of this chapter is the idea of being strong in the Lord. And this is a strength that each Christian should endeavor to possess, the type of strength that will help us stand against the wiles of the devil. And so last week we talked about this briefly at the end of our study, and how that this is definitely a battle, and how that we have an enemy that we are battling every day. And so let's go ahead and read verses 10 through 12 to kind of set the stage for the first part of our study this morning. So Ephesians chapter 6, beginning with verse 10, it says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." And so we see that we are to be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. And so last week we spoke some about how that this strength comes from the Lord and not ourselves. And so this is something that we need to be leaning upon the Lord. He has promised, and he will deliver in giving us the strength that we need to battle Satan and all of his wiles and his schemes and things like that he is putting out in front of us. And so we need to lean upon him. When we start leaning upon our own strength, our own wisdom, anything that originates within us and does not originate within God, when we begin relying upon those things, then we are setting ourselves up to fail. And so we must realize as we face this battle, as we said, it's a daily battle, as we face this battle, that we need to be relying upon God, and that there's a lot involved in that. And we're going to take a more in-depth look, Lord willing, at what it actually means to rely upon God and the things that he has given us, that he has provided for us in order to battle Satan and all of his schemes and those who work for him. And so this strength that we have originates from God. It originates from him. He has developed this. And so we need to search that out. We need to rely upon that. And we need to get away from the idea that our strength, our power comes from within us ourselves. And so this is very important as we begin to battle Satan and his devices, that we understand where true strength is going to come from. And so that's a very important point. So as we move on there in verse 10, we need to understand that the Christian life is a battleground and it's not a playground. And so our society today, they want to believe, and we see this, that's just forced upon us or portrayed to us in just really every aspect of our media and any advertisements, things like that this idea that this life is a playground and not a battleground. And we are not put upon this earth to play and to have a good time as our primary mission. And there's many times that having fun, taking part in recreation, doing those things that we enjoy are perfectly okay. And I don't want to paint a picture that we are not able as Christians to take part in those things, because we are, and I think the scriptures teach that. But what we need to understand is our primary mission here is to battle Satan, is to live for God, and in doing so, once we make that commitment to live for God, then we make an enemy of Satan. And so, therefore, that battle begins. And so our primary mission is to battle Satan as we live for God. And so our life here is going to be a battleground. It's not going to be a playground, and we need to understand that. And if we are not battling these things every day, then we need to take a close look at how we are living our life. So every Christian becomes a contestant and not a spectator. And so oftentimes we find Christians who just kind of want to sit on the sidelines and be a spectator. And that is not the way to live as a Christian. You must become a contestant. You must get in there. You must battle yourself. You must roll up your sleeves and join the efforts to battle Satan in this community and in the world at large. And so we need to understand that if we are living a life where we are endeavoring to sit on the sidelines and have others fight the battle for us, then we are not fulfilling the obligation that we have as a Christian. Because each one of us in here who are accountable have the obligation to battle in some way. Now, that may look different depending on each of our circumstances. I know circumstances vary wildly from just the people that we have in this auditorium this morning. And so opportunities, abilities, things of that nature vary from person to person. But each one of us has the ability to join this battle, to be a contender for good and battle Satan and live for God. And so we need to be looking at opportunities in order to join the battle and to start defending the gospel and doing what we need to do. And so this is something that on a daily basis we need to be making a priority to seek out those opportunities to battle Satan, because he's going to be throwing these things at us, and we'll discuss that a little more in depth as we continue our study. So every Christian finds himself opposed by a relentless foe. If we look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, it says, "Finally, brethren, pray for us that the word of the Lord may run swiftly and be glorified, just as it is with you, and that we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, for not all have faith." And so this is a prayer that we need to be praying. This is something that we need to be seeking. But the point here is that there are unreasonable and wicked men. There are forces at work here on this earth that we will need to battle. And so and those things take different forms. It could be our own family. It could be coworkers. It could be a stranger that we meet on the street. It could be the person that we're sitting next to at the red light that's mad because maybe we didn't give them enough space or something like that. It could be anyone that's going to try. It could be the one that pulls out in front of us that causes us to then be tempted to do things or to say things or to act in a way that is going to further the cause of Satan. And so every day we are battling these things, and this is a relentless foe. He's not going to let up until he has us. And so we need to understand that this is a daily fight, something that we are looking at each day. I mean, someone maybe that doesn't even leave the house, you are still battling Satan that day in some form. He's going to try to get you in some way. Maybe it's the media that you're consuming. Maybe it's the text that you are sending out to someone, or just that there's some way that he is going to try to tempt you that day to do something. Maybe it's just the fact that he's going to tell you, well, you're too tired to do these things, to study, to pray, to, somebody comes up or whatever. It's just, he's going to be throwing these things at you daily. And so this is a relentless foe, and we must go to battle with them. So the devil will focus his attention on us, and he will try to weaken our commitment to the Lord and persuade us to let up in our service to him, not to be as faithful as we ought to be. And this, as I've said before, Satan is very patient. He feels he has all the time in the world, and if he can just wear you away a little bit at a time, then he's got you. If he can weaken that commitment just a little bit today, and then tomorrow do the same thing, and then ultimately he's got you where he wants you. He wants you to be lax in your service. He wants you to start taking things for granted. He wants you to become lazy in what you are doing for God. And it may not be, you may not be standing up against, a crowd of people and speaking out against injustice and things that are going wrong and things like that. It may just be that battle in your home, in the in the quietness of your home saying, I'm too tired to pray, or I just, things like that. So it's a battle, and it's a battle each of us face. Any comments before we move on from there? But one thing we need to understand is that Satan cannot possess us. He cannot force anyone to reject Christ against our will. And so this is something that we can take confidence in, that Satan has a lot of things in his, working in his favor as far as in our society. But ultimately, he cannot force us to do wrong. That choice lies within each of us. And so sometimes we may feel we have no choice but to do wrong, but we need to be looking for that avenue to do right. And again, we will discuss that as we get deeper into our lesson. But he cannot force us to do what's wrong. We choose whom we serve. If we look at Romans chapter 6, verses 16 through 18, it says there, do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death or of obedience leading to righteousness. But God be thanked that though you were slaves of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine to which you were delivered, and having been set free from sin, you became slaves of righteousness. And so we choose in our spiritual lives whom we are going to be slaves of, whom we are going to serve. And that choice is up to you. That choice is up to me. No one else can make that choice. No one else can force us to serve good or evil. That choice lies within each of us. And so we must recognize that, and we must actively make that choice. And choosing to serve God is not a passive thing. It's not something, well, I'm not choosing to serve evil, so, therefore I'm serving God. That's not how it works. We must actively choose to serve God and actively participate in that, because any passiveness on our part leads to serving Satan. Because as we've already pointed out, this is a battle each of us must join. We are not spectators, we are participants. And so we must actively choose to serve God. And this is a choice we make, and it's followed by action. And so we will see that as we continue this study as well. Those who continue to believe in the Lord have the assurance of his protection. And so God has assured us that he will protect us if we are actively serving him. And so this is a promise that we have from God. Back in Romans chapter 8, verses 35 and 30 through 39, it says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are killed all day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Yet in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And so that passage there is one that should invoke a lot of courage within us as we endeavor to join this battle and to serve God, knowing that no created thing is able to separate us from the love of God. That love is ever present. And even though, we can separate ourselves from God in the sense that once we commit sin, we are separated from him, but that love for us is still there. That love is still present, and he's willing to accept us back. If we meet those conditions that he has laid out, that love is there. And so nothing can separate us from the love of God. Nothing can force us to serve any other master besides God. There is no created thing that is able to separate us from him and from the power and the strength that he gives those who endeavor to serve him. And so this is a very, very encouraging passage as we go about our service and as we attempt, or as we do join the battle in facing those things that Satan is going to be throwing at us on a daily basis. And so definitely we need to be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. That strength is going to come from Him. We have the ability to do that no matter what our position is. Each of us in here has that ability to draw from the strength that God is offering to us even now, even today, and every day that we live. That strength is available to us. And He has offered that. He has promised those things. And we can have faith and we can gain strength from all of these things. Any comments or anything along those lines?
I can't remember the cartoon, but others probably remember because it was a cartoon kind of as a kid. But kind of the same thing going on. They had a little angel on one shoulder, and them on the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really not played.
Yeah. Yeah, that's eerily realistic in a lot of ways. It is, because I mean, a lot of times it's our conscience, I guess, battling our desire versus our conscience, and we have that battle. I know each of us face that, in a lot of ways, probably on a daily basis. That little voice trying to pull us away, but yet we can hear the other voice that's drawing us closer to God. And so we can, as the cartoon does, you knock the good or the evil off your shoulder. And so that's an action that we all must take. Any other comments? As we continue on there in verse 11, it says, "Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil." And so this our ultimate goal is to be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. And so we must realize that Satan has wiles. He has schemes. And we need to understand that. We need to accept that. But one thing we don't have to accept is we don't have to be ignorant of them. We can understand the schemes and the wiles of the devil. So we know what's going on, and we need to recognize those schemes and not be ignorant of them. If you look at 2 Corinthians 2 and verse 11, the last part of that, as Paul was writing to the Corinthians, he says, "For we are not ignorant of his devices." And so as we mature, as we get older, we need to become more and more familiar with his devices, in the sense that we begin recognizing that. Maybe that device got us when we were in our early 20s, but by the time we get a little older, we need to be understanding, that's a device of Satan. He's putting that there to trip me up, and we need to understand, we need to recognize those things, and our knowledge of his devices needs to increase with our age and our maturity. And so this is all a part of maturing as a Christian and becoming a more well-rounded and perfect Christian, is understanding what Satan's devices are. And we don't have to be ignorant of those things. And a lot of times we just need to open our eyes and understand and begin asking questions. And, asking questions and investigating, I mean, it goes a long way. When we're looking at a situation and we're trying to see, well, is this good or evil? We'll just start asking some questions. Maybe the first thing is, well, what's the results of this? What fruit is going to be borne out if this takes place? What's going to be the result? Is it going to be good or evil? How is this going to look to non-Christians? What is this going to do to my faith? Is it going to draw me closer to God, or is it going to push me further away from God? And so as we start asking questions like that, we start seeing the schemes and the wiles of Satan, and something that looks very innocent and maybe in and of itself may not be wrong on the outside, but once you kind of get more in depth and look at it on the inside, It's one of Satan's wiles. It's one of his schemes, and we don't have to be ignorant of that. We can go in and we can investigate those things. And as we said, as we get older, and this is one thing that those who are younger need to rely on older people when maybe someone comes up and says, "Hey, I know, that road you're traveling down, it's a dangerous road, and you're very susceptible to maybe this scheme or whatever. I think you need to change direction." And maybe they've got personal experience in going down that same road, or maybe they had a relative, another child or something that traveled down that road and ended up in a bad place. And so we need to be relying upon older Christians as they try to help, and those who are older, we need to be helping younger Christians to see maybe these schemes, these wiles that they aren't necessarily looking for, because a lot of times as young people, those who are young, and we probably all did this, are looking to have a good time. We're looking for joy, and there's nothing wrong with joy, but Satan loves hiding sin in joy, in things that we think are going to make us happy. And ultimately, they don't in the very end. That joy is hollow. It causes us problems, and ultimately we're going to have regret instead of joy. And so when we look at Satan's wiles or schemes, we kind of, and I'm not saying all of them fall into these three categories, but I've got three categories here that I think the vast majority of Satan's schemes fall into. And so I wanted to kind of briefly go over those. And, the first one being blinding people with false doctrine. How many people do we know in our everyday lives that are blinded by false doctrine? And there's many reasons why they are blinded by false doctrine. Maybe they're looking out for themselves, or the false doctrine is exactly what they want to hear. It aligns with their view of the way they think things need to go. And so people become blinded by false doctrine. And Satan's, those who are following Satan's plans, some of them are very good at portraying this false doctrine in a way that sounds so good. And I know we all have heard these things, and we hear it, and there for a minute, maybe it piques our interest, and we're like, hey, yeah. But then once we begin investigating and looking at those things, then we understand what they actually are. But Satan is so good at blinding people with false doctrine. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 3 through 4. But even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. And so Satan has blinded so many people with this false doctrine that the gospel of Christ, that Christ, his image is unable to shine on them because they are so blinded by this false doctrine. And so all over this town, this state, this world, even today, there is false doctrine being preached from so many pulpits. And people come in by the hundreds, and some places even by the thousands. You hear these mega churches. Joel Osteen and a lot of these guys, they bring these people in, and the tone of their voice, the what they are saying, they're preaching this prosperity and all that type of stuff, and it's just leading these people astray, and it's blinding them even as we speak this morning. People are being blinded by false doctrine. And so we need to be aware of these things. We need to be looking out for false doctrine. We always need to have an open mind, and maybe someone helping us to understand the scriptures better. And we don't ever need to close our mind to learning something more perfectly than we did before. And we see scriptures that teach this without a shadow of a doubt, but we always need to be comparing what is being taught to the scriptures. And if something's coming up and it's new, it's revolutionary or whatever, we need to be looking, how does that line up with the gospel? Because Satan is very good at blinding us with this false doctrine. Any comments on that?
Shane, can't quote scripture, but, I know that, back in Jesus' time, Paul and Cephas, people were kind of coming to them I'm Paul, I'm
Yeah.
Cephas. And today, the same thing happens, and I listen to Joel Osteen. He can pull you in. He's good.
He's good.
A lot of people, a lot of people that I work with and that I have worked with, in recent years, they follow him over. I listen to Joel Osteen every day. You know what? I thought, I don't know what it is, but I listen to this song. I know exactly what it is. He's good. Satan is good at that. And he got that person in there that's teaching a whole lot of good stuff that may be right in some way, but
He makes you feel good about where you're at right there.
What he does, Shane, too, I think,
Yeah.
is that we listen to him and for whatever he teaches and where he stops at, that's where we stop. We don't need any more to see if what he's saying is wrong, right or wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, this epistle is written to Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, we're talking about people in the world, false doctrine to everyone.
Yeah.
But there's false doctrine that is abounding within the church among brethren that we need to be on guard for concerning. And that is, we went through it. Some of our older brethren, like Brother Sutton, battled institutionalism, missionary society, those sort of things. There are things that have come on since in recent years that have come up about the worshiping, trying to get it out. You don't need to worship in the church. You don't have to worship in the church. Take this idea of just coming together and not having to have a church or necessarily a local meeting place and so on, and trying to do away with this assembling together sort of thing. So there's just lots of things that we need to be on guard about. It makes you look good, sound good, it's fun, everybody likes it, it's relaxing, you feel good.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about it, it's how same thing the Baptists do. It feels good, so that's what we're going to do. And so we have to be careful about things that make us feel good, because those are the things that are going to attract us, that we're going to fall into as Christians.
Yeah. And one that we've encountered is marriage and divorce. Just recently, Christians that we know will take maybe the failures of the church leadership to deal with a situation, maybe where there's abuse and neglect, and they use that as an excuse for this lady to divorce her husband. And instead of looking at the root problem and fixing that problem, they're condoning sin. They're saying there's this failure in church leadership to deal with these situations, therefore the woman has no other choice but to leave her husband. But I know those situations are difficult, and it's never easy to live in and to deal with those things. But we can't accept false doctrine just because there's other sin somewhere else, or there's a lack of leadership in the congregation. And so we've seen this very recently, and it's one of those things where these people are so good they won't come out. Other brethren have called them on the carpet and like, what are you saying? Will you just say plainly what you are condoning? And they won't do it. They won't come out and say it, because then they know that there'll be a lot of backlash. But yet they use all this language and things like that to point you in that direction. And but they won't just come out and say it. And it's a very, very sneaky thing that people are doing, even today within the church, and congregations not far from here. And so we need to be very aware of those things, because they're out there, and we can get caught up in this, and especially on social media as we start reading these people. It's so easy for people to spread this false doctrine today, because we start reading these little snippets. Our attention span is about an inch long, and we're just kind of taking these little nuggets, and before we know it, these little nuggets have taken us down a road that is just at odds with what the Scriptures teach. And so yeah, definitely. So Lord willing, we will do that. And so blinding people with false doctrine is a wile, or it is a scheme of Satan. Another thing he does is enticing us to indulge in the desires of the flesh. And so we see this, and we talk about this all the time, but we need to be aware of this, and we need to be reminded of it basically every day, that this enticement to partake in or indulge in the desires of the flesh is a very real thing. And so as we walk out of this building this morning, we are going to be bombarded with billboards and other things just trying to pull us away. And maybe even while we're sitting in here, our mind's drawn to that. Maybe we get a notification on our phone, even in the pews, that starts pulling us away from worshiping God even this morning. And so Satan is going to be enticing us away with all these desires of the flesh, the things maybe we are going to be doing this afternoon or tomorrow or things like that. He's trying to pull us away from serving God. Ephesians chapter 2, the first 3 verses says, "And you were made alive who were dead in the trespasses of sin, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others." And so here we see how that, Paul, in the first part of our study of Ephesians, he was talking to the Ephesians there and reminding them of where they once were, where they were following this same course. And we all have at one point followed this course. But we need to be pulled back. We need to understand where this leads. As we are following the desires of the flesh, this is always going to lead us in a place that's going to have a dark end. It's going to be hollow. Our relationships here on earth are going to suffer, as well as our relationship to God. And so we need to understand what Satan is doing. How many families have been destroyed because maybe the mother or the father or both of them are chasing their own desires and not looking at the desires or the needs, not the desires, but the needs of each other and of the family. How many fathers have neglected their children? How many mothers have neglected their children? And the family just falls apart because Satan has enticed one or the other or both to indulge in these fleshly desires. It could be sexual. It could be it just could be material. It could be just pleasure. Just anything. Once we put that above our service to God, and in our service to God, our service to our family and to our fellow Christians, once we rank those things above that, then Satan is pulling us away. And the end is, if we don't get that under control, the end could be very detrimental to us and to our families. How many homes have we seen broken up? How many children that never obey the gospel? How many, just neglect and all sorts of things just come from Satan enticing us by these worldly desires. And our society today is just so riddled with this message that you do what pleases you. You have the right to be happy. Whatever makes you happy, no one can say you can't do that. And anything that you can think of, people will pursue because of that message. And it takes people to some very dark places. And they end up literally lying in the gutter on the side of the street. Families are destroyed. Children are neglected. You get murders. You get all sorts of things that happen because people chase what they want, what they think is going to make them happy. And they think no one has a right to deny me this because it's what makes me happy. And so Satan puts that doctrine into our minds, and he starts enticing us away from doing what's right, and it just leads us down a road that is ultimately going to lead us to destruction. And we need to be aware of that. Those first steps that we take down that path can be very small. As we said before, Satan just has to veer us off just a little bit, and just keep us going at a slight angle to that straight and narrow way. He just has to, it's not far to get us off that path. And once we're off that path, we're right beside it for a little bit, and then we're getting further and further away, and before you know it, we're heading in the opposite direction. Satan is very patient. You understand that time does a lot. Time is it can work both ways, but time is definitely an ally of Satan as he pulls us away from God. So enticing us to indulge in the desires of the flesh definitely is a scheme or a wile of Satan. Yes, David.
Shane, you tell me I only live once in life. I can't enjoy all this.
Yeah.
Shane.
YOLO. You only live once. How many times do we see that? But that should be actually something that would convict us. I mean, we only got one chance to get this thing right. Yeah, we only live once. And so if we don't get it right, then the hereafter is going to be a bad place for us. And so we need to take that in a different way. And like I said, I'm not up here preaching that we can't have a good time, and that we can't do things that please us and that relaxes us, because we can, but we've got to keep all that in perspective. We have to, and we have to prioritize God. We have to prioritize our family. We just have to prioritize a lot of things, but we can serve God and we can be happy. And we are happiest when we serve God. Sin doesn't bring happiness. Ultimately, it brings misery. And we see this over and over again with our celebrities. They make it to the top, and how many of them overdose, and they're addicted to drugs and all sorts of stuff because it just doesn't make them happy. They get there and it's not what they thought it was. And so they're very unhappy. Their family falls apart, and it's just not a pretty place to be. And so we need to understand that. And then the last thing I have here is bringing persecution to those trying to do right. And so he's blinding us with false doctrine. He's enticing us to indulge in the desires of the flesh. If he doesn't get us with those two things, then he's going to try persecution. I'm going to persecute you because I didn't get you the first two ways. And so 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 and 9 says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world." And so we need to understand this, and we need to be ready for it. And persecution can take many different forms. A lot of times we think of somebody physically persecuting us, physically harming us with beatings or things like that. And a lot of times that may happen. It doesn't happen a lot in this country. It may. I'm not saying it never happens here, because it very well could. But a lot of times we suffer in other ways. We could suffer financially. Maybe in our business dealings, maybe at work when we're pressured to do things, maybe be dishonest in how we deal in business. we might lose our job if our boss is trying to force us to be dishonest in how we are handling a client or a customer or something like that. Maybe if we have a business, maybe we miss a big opportunity to make a lot of money because we simply refuse to be dishonest. Maybe we have people talk about us and spread bad rumors about us. It could be at work. It could be at large in the community. People talk about us in several different ways. This is all persecution. Maybe it could be at home. If our spouse is not a faithful Christian, and there could be things going on there that we're persecuted for doing those things. We've all known of children who have suffered, persecution in some ways when they've obeyed the parent or obeyed the gospel, and their parents are really opposed to that, and you have maybe some persecution going on there, and we've known of people like that. And so if Satan can't get us with trying to pull us away, he's going to try this persecution. He's going to start tightening the screws on us, so to speak, and trying to pull us away from God that way. And so this, I believe, like I said, and there may be other categories, but I think the vast majority of Satan's schemes probably fall into one of these three in what he's trying to do to us. And we get into these, and probably I'm sure we could spend a whole lesson discussing each one and the type of things that Satan is doing within each one of these. But we need to be looking out for these things, and we need to understand the basic mode that Satan uses in trying to pull us away. Things haven't really changed in the centuries that this world has existed. The way we fulfill these desires and these lusts and these enticements, they may change, but the fundamental thing that pulls us away from God has stayed the same throughout the centuries. And so nothing really today, like I said, that the way we fulfill that might be a little different. It might be digital instead of just physical, so to speak. But that is the same thing that Satan has always used, Tim.
I like the way you frame your assessment of this. But let's not be fooled into thinking that Satan will not come within these walls.
Yes, sir.
With every one of them.
Yes, sir.
As Paul warned the Ephesian elders, from among you. Let's not fall into that.
Yeah, and just we get a certain amount of comfort inside these walls here, and when we are together. But I think we all understand that Satan can come in and he can do these things, all of these things, right inside this building, right inside the relationships that we have here, and these it's a very real and present danger, and we need to be looking out for that, because those hurt the worst. They hurt the worst when it comes from right here. Excuse me. They do the most damage. They do the most damage. They do the most damage to us. They do the most damage maybe to our reputation in the community and all of that. They do the most damage when they come right here. And so it's a very real and present danger. We need to understand that, and we need to be watching out for it. And so that's a very good point. Very good point. So Lord willing, I know the new quarter starts next week. Ruben's going to take over once we finish Ephesians. So I'll go ahead and, Lord willing, finish. I don't know if we'll get done next week or the next, but we'll move through this last part of the chapter. I believe we'll move through a lot quicker than we did the first part. And so once we finish up with Ephesians, then Reuben will take over, and I'm not for sure exactly where we're going. So anyway, we have another week or two in Ephesians, and then we'll swap over to something else at that point. But thank you so much for your attention and those who made comments.